Are you ready to get started? I am. I know a lot of you have been waiting a month and a half to get started on this first block. Well, it's finally here. You should have gotten an email with links to this video and Kim's video, along with a link to your downloadable pattern for block 1, and instructions on how to sign into Quilt Fusion and access your subscription so you can customize the block if you want to. This video is just going to walk you through a couple simple tips that's going to help you out throughout the quilt. So there's 3 basic steps to completing this quilt on any block that's going to help you out, to stay organized and stuff like that. The first one is going to be trace by fabric. You're then going to fuse that fusible webbing onto the back side of the appropriate fabric. And then step 2 is you're going to cut and group by letter. So as you cut out pieces, you're going to group those pieces by the first letter, the first digit that you've labeled those by. Once you've got everything cut out and grouped by letter, you're then going to use the fusing guide to fuse in the number order of that label. So let me walk you through that, how that's going to work right on the quilt block 1 as I make it. So the first thing is you want to trace and iron by fabric, okay? So the patterns, the tracing guides in the patterns, everything's grouped by fabrics. Now you may have, some fabrics are on multiple pages, but everything is grouped together by fabric. Now, some pieces you may want to fussy cut, in which case you may want to cut these pieces out so you can really place them and finesse them on here. So you're going to trace by fabric and then you're going to iron by fabric. So I'm going to go ahead and do these treetop pieces. Going to go ahead and do my kangaroo, and again I'm going to fussy cut so that his kind of haunches end up right on that spot right there, and this is his haunch here, so I'm going to put that there and iron that down. And I'm going to do this for the rest of the fabrics. I'm going to go ahead and iron everything for this block onto their fabrics. But one thing I do want to point out here is don't feel like you've got to cut every single piece. There are some pretty tiny little pieces here. These are the eyes to the koala bear and the kangaroo and his paws. Sometimes these pieces are so small it's better off using some sort of decorative stitch or something like that, whether it's embroidery floss, a French knot or something like that. So just kind of as you're tracing, you'll kind of say to yourself, hey, I don't want to have to cut out these itty bitty pieces. Okay, I'm going to mark them later on the placement guide as to where their eye goes, and then I'll use a decorative stitch at the end to kind of add those elements in. So in my case, I'm going to do the paws and possibly the eyes. I want to look at them first and see. And then the rest I'll do with some black embroidery floss. Okay, so I've got all my pieces ironed onto the backside of the fabrics. And you can see everything's labeled as I need them. So now I'm going to start cutting, and I've started cutting here, but as I cut, I get to what I call generic step number 2, which is you're going to cut and group by letter. So since all of these pieces are labeled, they're labeled with a letter and a number. So now that I'm cutting, I'm going to group all pieces, let's say G pieces, together and put them off to the side, or F pieces together, put them off to the side. So as I'm cutting all these different fabrics, I'm going to look at the letter and I'm going to put them in their respective groups. I don't really need to know whether it's a kangaroo, koala, or a tree part. I just know that all F pieces go together, all G pieces go together, all D pieces go together. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm start cutting these pieces out, and I'm going to group them by letter. Now, one thing that may happen, since you've already ironed these all together and it takes a little while to cut them out, you may find that sometimes the paper backing starts peeling off of some of these pieces as they cool down. And so it's a lot easier if that paper's stuck to it and, to cut it. What I usually do is if that starts happening, I'll go ahead and right before I cut it, I'll give it a nice shot with the iron just to kind of re-adhere it on there real quick. And then I can start cutting and I don't have to worry about the paper falling off as I cut. Okay, I got all my pieces cut out and I've got everything grouped by letter, which takes me to step number 3, and we're going to organize everything by number. So as I mentioned before, all pieces have a letter and a number. So this is G2, G1, G4, G5, G6. Now, when I place them and fuse them down, I'm going to place them by number. So the first placement I'm going to do is G1. The second one I'm going to do is G2, G3, G4, and so on. And that's the order that I'll be laying them down and fusing them. So I'm going to grab the light table. So I'm going to peel off the backing. And this is G1. So that's going to be the first piece I place down. And keep in mind I've got parchment paper over top of my fusing guide. The next piece is G2. Next is G3. Okay, iron's warmed up now. G4. Five. Now, remember when I said I wasn't going to trace the eyes and the nose. Eye is G7, nose is G6. I don't have those pieces. I'm going to use embroidery floss for those. And before I take this off the placement guide, I'm going to just use a little pencil and I'm going to mark where the eye goes and where the nose goes. That's going to get covered up with embroidery floss. I'll probably do a French knot there. I might do just a little satin stitch possibly for the nose. Okay, so I'm ready to do my landscape pieces. And you see I've got my first piece laid on here. This is D1. Okay. Now one thing about the placement guide that you'll notice, this border or line around here at the edge, that lines up with the seam line of this block, okay? So the actual fabric extends 1/4 of an inch on either side of that seam line. You see my fabric that's cut to 9.5 inches. It's 9.5 inches, but this is 9 inches, okay? So just so you know, this is lining everything up on your seam line. Now next, you'll notice that my D1 piece here, if I place that down and line it up with the corner, you'll see that it looks like it's off. It's not off because I need overlap here so that it can be fused to this D2 piece. Now what I can do to help, and this is especially helpful if you don't have a light board that you're putting these pieces together with. What you can use is you can use the 2 corners here to line up your next piece. Okay, so D2, and if I line up this corner and this corner, you'll see I have overlap here that I can use to fuse the 2 pieces together with, and I can be assured that it's lined up perfectly now. Now if I go to my next piece, D3, same thing. I'm going to line up those corner pieces, and you'll see that the middle part overlaps the next piece. Lining up this corner and this corner. Again, if you check out, this is going to overlap up here. Grab my last landscape piece. Now keep in mind these bushes, these are placed separately from the landscape pieces. This is just this assembly. So I'm lining up this corner and this corner. If I line that up, I want to make sure that this corner matches up here and this corner matches up here. That way I can be assured that when I sew this block to the next block, that globe shape is going to match up all the way around. Everything's lightly fused together. I still make plenty of mistakes that I don't want to permanently fuse this stuff down. And then again, I'm just going to lightly fuse this to my background block. There's our first block. ready for a sashing on the side here and then quilting down. Okay, so I'm ready to start free motion quilting around all my pieces. And I've spray basted it to the batting. There is no backing fabric to this. That goes on at the very end, and then we'll quilt in the inside in the ditch to kind of secure that. But for right now, I'm just gonna secure down all the applique pieces. The other thing I want to point out real quick before I start quilting is I don't know if you noticed in the previous shot, but this tree extends down behind the kangaroo, and this yellow fabric happens to be a little bit lighter, and some of these pieces tend to show through. I went back in and I pulled this up and then cut off that tree just a little bit so that it didn't show as much in there. This dark fabric really contrasted with that, and I didn't care for that. So you may want to do that. I've got some monofilament thread in the top and some white thread in the bottom, and I'm ready to get going. Okay, I'm all done quilting. I've done some decorative stitches, and I've also trimmed up the batting to the edge of the block. Okay, so that's it for this video. Next month, I'm going to show you how to customize each of your blocks in Quilt Fusion if you so want to. Feel free to stop by the Facebook group for One World. Make sure you join it so that you can ask questions, share your progress. Kim and I will be hanging out in there to answer anybody's questions. See you next month. All right.